Life after the pandemic felt like a never-ending remix of the same sad song. First, it took Dad. A cough that wouldn't quit, a fever that wouldn't budge. Then Mom, a month later, the hospital walls echoing with the beeping of machines, the sterile scent of disinfectant a constant reminder of the fight she was losing. Two wonderful people, gone in a blink, stolen by a stupid virus. I was Amelia, 25 years old, and suddenly an orphan for the second time. The first time, the orphanage walls felt cold and the other kids were strangers. This time, the emptiness felt different, a hollow ache in a house filled with memories. The lawyer called it a nest egg, $100,000 left behind by Mom and Dad. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a lifeline. They'd always encouraged my dancing, taking me to classes, watching every recital with tears in their eyes. It felt right to honor that love. So, I took a deep breath, wiped away the tears blurring my vision, and rented out a smaller place closer to downtown, a cozy 2-bedroom with hardwood floors that begged to be danced on. That's where Amelia's Studio of Grace was born. The first few months were a hustle. Flyers plastered on every lamppost, online ads that ate up my meager savings, and countless no thank yous from parents who couldn't afford lessons. But slowly, word spread. Maybe it was the catchy jingle I recorded myself singing, slightly off-key, but hey, enthusiastic, or maybe it was the free introductory class I offered. Whatever it was, kids started trickling in. Lily, a shy 6-year-old with pigtails that bounced as she danced, became my first star student. Her parents, a sweet couple who worked double shifts, practically beamed with pride at their daughter's newfound confidence. Then came the boisterous Miller brothers, 8 and 10, with boundless energy and a competitive streak a mile wide. My days were a whirlwind of giggles, missteps, and the sheer joy of seeing them discover the rhythm within. Social media became my best friend. I started posting short videos of myself dancing, leaps, pirouettes, the occasional spectacular stumble that always ended in laughter. It felt like a risk at first, putting myself out there like that. But the response was amazing. Comments flooded in, "Wow, you're amazing. You inspire me to dance again." Even a few messages from fellow dance teachers, offering tips and encouragement. One day, a notification popped up, a like and a comment on a particularly sassy salsa routine I'd posted. "Damn girl, you can move," it read. A little cheeky, sure, but it made me smile. This David guy kept popping up on my videos, leaving comments that were more than just compliments. He talked about music, shared his favorite dance routines, and even quoted some ballet greats I admired. David was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I did, from the intricacies of a grand jeté to my favorite childhood cartoon. One sunny afternoon, a giant bouquet of lilies, my absolute favorite, appeared outside the studio door, a card signed simply, "Your biggest fan." And there he stood, leaning against the brick wall, a sheepish grin on his face. It wasn't fireworks at first sight, but a slow burn. Dates filled with laughter and stolen kisses, weekends spent exploring hidden cafes and art galleries. A year later, we were saying I do under a canopy of white roses, surrounded by friends and family. Moving into David's apartment was supposed to be the next chapter, a fresh start, a real family, as he called it. His mom, Beatrice, lived downstairs, a tiny, energetic woman with a smile that could light up a room. At first, she doted on me, showering me with compliments and homemade cookies. "You're good for David, Amelia," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "He needs someone like you to keep him grounded." But 6 months in, the cracks started to show. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at the studio, I collapsed onto the couch, scrolling through social media mindlessly. Suddenly, Beatrice popped her head through the doorway, her smile replaced by a tight frown. "Still glued to that phone, Amelia?" she said, her voice sharp. "Don't you think David deserves a little more attention than some random dance video?" I froze. "It's just a couple of students," I mumbled, shoving my phone into my pocket. "Students, huh?" Beatrice scoffed. "All those men watching you wiggle around online?" how do you think that makes David feel? Her words hung heavy in the air, laced with suspicion. My cheeks burned. There's nothing wrong with a few dance videos, I snapped, surprised by the rising anger in my voice. It's how I advertise my classes. Beatrice sniffed. Well, maybe you should advertise a little less shimmy and a little more stay-at-home wife. Then, without another word, she flounced back downstairs, leaving me fuming. David came home later that night, oblivious to the tension simmering in the air. I tried to tell him about Beatrice's comments, but he just brushed it off. Mom's just worried, Ames. You know how she is. His casual dismissal stung more than Beatrice's words ever could. This was supposed to be my family, a safe space. Yet, here I was, feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. David started poking holes in my dreams with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. Teaching kids to twirl around in tutus? That's not exactly gonna pay the bills, Ames, he'd say, a smirk playing on his lips. He kept pushing this idea of me getting a real job, something serious, like an office manager. But my studio boomed. More kids, more smiles, more of that pure joy that only comes from seeing tiny humans discover the magic of movement. Business was good, really good. So good that after a year, I sat David down, spreadsheet in hand, ready to share the studio's financial success story. The numbers were clear. Amelia's Studio of Grace was a money-making machine. His reaction was not what I expected. He slammed the damn spreadsheet on the table, his face turning a shade of red that rivaled my best pirouette outfit. What the hell is this? He bellowed. You think you can just prance around online half-naked and call it work? Shut this ridiculous thing down and be a proper wife. My jaw hit the floor. Half-naked? David, those are dance videos, for crying out loud. I sputtered, completely bewildered. Don't play innocent, Ames, he snarled. All those creeps ogling you online? This ain't some highfalutin art project, it's a glorified peep show. Tears welled up in my eyes. This wasn't the man I fell in love with, the man who supported my dreams. This was a stranger, his voice laced with a possessiveness that sent shivers down my spine. The studio is my passion, David, I managed to say, my voice tight. And it's supporting our family just fine. He scoffed. Supporting our family? You call prancing around in tights a family? You spending all day playing dress up while I bring home the real paycheck? The truth, ugly and undeniable, hung in the air. This wasn't about the money, or the videos. This was about his fragile ego, his need for a wife who fit neatly into his outdated box of what a woman should be. Defeated, I did what he wanted. I closed the studio. My online presence dwindled to a few dry, instructional videos, a pale shadow of the passion I once poured into my content. David's demands became a suffocating cage. The house had to be spotless, not a single speck of dust daring to interrupt his pristine vision. Meals turned into a bizarre torture show: lasagna, chicken wings, potatoes with meat. Stress, combined with this fatty dishes, did a number on my body. The weight piled on, slowly at first, then with alarming speed. My reflection in the mirror became a stranger, a puffy-faced, sluggish woman who bore little resemblance to the once graceful dancer staring back. My leaps felt heavy, my turns lacked the precision I once took for granted. Even the simplest moves sent me winded and dripping with sweat. Shooting dance videos became a humiliating exercise. David would hover behind the camera, his cruel laughter echoing as I stumbled through a routine, my body betraying my every desire. Look at those rolls jiggling, Ames. Maybe you should call this video Dancing Hippo. But the worst part wasn't the weight itself, it was the way David used it as a weapon. Fat cow. Useless lump. These became his daily greetings, laced with a sickening smugness. When I suggested seeing a nutritionist, he scoffed. You think a few kale chips will make all those creepy guys online forget about your jiggle factor? One evening, as I shuffled through the kitchen, David stopped me, his eyes raking over my body with undisguised disgust. You know, Ames, He drawled, "It's no wonder your real parents dumped you. Look at you now, a fat, washed-up nobody. Who else would put up with you?" His words hung in the air, a venomous snake coiling around my heart. As if David's relentless digs weren't enough, Beatrice decided to add her own brand of misery to the mix. One afternoon, while David was at work, she barged into the house, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on her face. "So, Amelia," she chirped, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "when are you going to bless David with some kids? Tick-tock, you know, biological clock and all that." I gritted my teeth. The mere thought of bringing a child into this toxic environment sent chills down my spine. Having kids had always been a dream, but not with David, not like this. A child deserved a loving, supportive home, not a pressure cooker of negativity and control. "We'll talk about it, Beatrice," I mumbled, forcing a smile. She narrowed her eyes, the smile evaporating. "Talk about it? Amelia, David needs an heir. This apartment isn't going to stay empty forever, you know." Her words were laced with a possessiveness that made me want to scream. This wasn't about giving David a child, this was about securing her hold on the family, about ensuring I remained trapped. The decision to take birth control was one of the few things I did for myself in that suffocating time. David, predictably, wasn't happy when his nightly prodding, as he charmingly called it, failed to produce the desired result. The already strained relationship between us dipped further into icy silence. One evening, as I sat on the couch, he stomped into the living room, a dark cloud hanging over him. "What's the deal, Ames?" he barked. "You acting like a friggin' nun lately? Is there something wrong with you?" I met his gaze, a newfound steely resolve settling in my gut. "There's nothing wrong with me, David," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Except maybe being stuck in this loveless marriage." His face contorted in rage. "Loveless? Don't you dare pull that crap. Who put a roof over your head, huh? Who feeds you?" His voice rose with each question, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. I stood up, my reflection in the TV's glossy screen showing a woman I barely recognized, the spark of defiance back in her eyes. "You may provide the roof, David," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But you stole my happiness. You stole my dreams." He lunged towards me, but I sidestepped him, my newfound awareness of my body surprising even me. "Don't touch me," I spat, my voice laced with a scrap of pride. My body, burdened by the extra weight and constant stress, started rebelling. I'd wake up feeling like I'd wrestled a grizzly bear in my sleep, a dull ache throbbing behind my eyes that wouldn't budge. Simple tasks like cleaning or cooking became monumental efforts, leaving me breathless and yearning for the comfort of the couch. Of course, David had no sympathy. My pleas for a break, a doctor's visit, were met with derision. "Quit your whining, Ames," he'd growl. "A little fatigue won't kill you. Just get your chores done." One evening, the world began to spin. I was making dinner, chopping vegetables with hands that felt numb and clumsy. The room tilted, the fluorescent kitchen light turning into a blinding starburst. My vision blurred, the rhythmic thud of the knife hitting the cutting board replaced by a dull roar in my ears. The next thing I knew, the cold tile floor greeted my cheek, the metallic tang of blood filling my mouth. A harsh voice cut through the fog clouding my mind. "Get the hell up, Amelia. Dinner's getting cold." It was David, his face contorted in a mask of fury. He grabbed my legs, shaking them roughly. "Stop playing dead and get me some food." Pain lanced through my head, a searing counterpoint to the dizziness threatening to pull me back under. "I can't." I tried to speak, but all that came out was a weak moan. The world faded again, the darkness this time a welcome embrace. Consciousness flickered back like a faulty light bulb. The sterile white wall swam in and out of focus, the rhythmic beep of a machine the only sound breaking the silence. This wasn't my apartment. Panic clawed at my throat, a dry rasp escaping my lips. "Easy there, dear," a soothing voice cooed beside me. A kind-faced nurse hovered nearby, her touch gentle as she checked my vitals. "You're safe now. You're at mercy, General." "What happened?" My voice emerged dry and weak. The events of the kitchen swirled in my head, the dizziness, the cold floor, David's angry face. Pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. "You fainted," the nurse explained. "Your husband brought you in. He seemed pretty agitated, demanding we get you back on your feet quick. The doctor will be in to see you shortly." A microinfarction. The doctor's words echoed in my mind, a stark warning. He'd painted a grim picture: continued stress, the unhealthy lifestyle, it could all lead to something much worse, paralysis. The threat struck a chord deep within me. Paralysis. The image of myself, trapped, helpless, filled me with a primal fear. Lying in that sterile bed, a new resolve solidified. Change. I needed to change. For my health, for my sanity, for the life I still craved. The next morning, the rhythmic beeping of the machines was replaced by a knock on the door. A jolt of fear shot through me, but it was quickly replaced by surprise as two uniformed officers entered the room. "Mrs. Amelia Jones?" The taller officer, a woman with a kind but firm face, inquired. "Yes, that's me," I croaked, my voice still recovering. "We're Officers Ramirez and Lee," the other officer, a man with a no-nonsense air, introduced themselves. "The doctors informed us about the bruises on your arms and legs, Mrs. Jones." Tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill over. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. It's my husband," I confessed, my voice thick with emotion. The officers exchanged a look. Officer Lee pulled up a chair beside my bed. "Can you tell us what happened, Mrs. Jones?" he asked, his voice calm and reassuring. And so I did. I recounted the details of my life with David, the emotional abuse, the constant belittlement, and finally, the violence that led to my collapse. Their faces, initially neutral, hardened with anger as I spoke. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The day of my discharge from the hospital was bittersweet. The house, a small inheritance from my parents, had been gathering dust while I'd been trapped in my marriage. But as I walked through the door, sunlight streaming through the windows, it felt like a new beginning. The initial euphoria, however, was short-lived. My phone would buzz with unknown numbers, a chilling voice spewing threats and insults. "You think you can just run away, Amelia?" a voice snarled down the phone one evening. "I'll find you. You'll come crawling back to me, begging for forgiveness." It was David. My heart hammered against my ribs, fear threatening to consume me. But then, a surge of anger replaced the fear. I wouldn't let him win. Grabbing my recorder, I hit the record button. "Leave me alone, David," I managed, my voice shaky, but firm. "Don't tell me what to do," he roared back. "You're mine, Amelia. You always will be." "Don't listen to him, Amelia," my lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah, advised when I relayed the harassing calls. "We'll get a restraining order, and the police will take care of the rest." The court case culminated in a tense courtroom setting. David, his face red with anger, sat across from me, while Beatrice glared daggers from the back row. The judge, a stern-looking woman with a graying bun, turned to me, her gaze firm but kind. Considering the evidence presented, including witness testimonies and the audio recordings, the court finds in favor of Mrs. Amelia Jones. A permanent restraining order is hereby granted, forbidding Mr. David Jones from approaching Mrs. Amelia Jones within 500 feet, or from contacting her in any way, directly or indirectly, through third parties, or through social media. David opened his mouth to protest, but his lawyer, a harried-looking man, placed a restraining hand on his arm. Beatrice, her face a mask of fury, stormed out of the courtroom. David, defeated, slumped back in his chair, his face ashen. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice ringing through the courtroom, "Mr. David Jones will be required to pay Mrs. Amelia Jones a sum of..." She paused, consulting the documents before her, $2,000 per month in spousal support for a period of 2 years, considering the financial disparity between the parties. A gasp escaped David's lips. Spousal support? He'd expected me to crawl back, not walk away financially secure. The sterile comfort of the hospital room felt like a lifetime ago. Back in my own house, the disquiet that had gnawed at me for weeks intensified. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent a jolt of fear through me. I knew I couldn't stay. David's threats, the relentless phone calls, and Beatrice's venomous messages had taken their toll, chipping away at the fragile sense of security I'd built. Selling the house was a nerve-wracking process. I confided in Sarah, my lawyer, who helped me navigate the legalities while keeping everything under wraps. "We can't risk David or Beatrice finding out, Amelia," she warned, her face grim. "A fresh start is exactly what you need." And I sold my house to a charming married couple. Starting anew in a different city was both terrifying and exhilarating. Finding a small, cozy apartment felt like a victory. The first tendrils of hope started to take root, nurtured by the anonymity of my new surroundings. And then, there was dance. The dance studio, once a cherished haven, had become a painful reminder of what I'd lost. But the fire in my soul, the rhythm coursing through my veins, refused to be extinguished. Hesitantly, I rented a small space, the creak of the wooden floorboards a welcome sound this time. As the weeks turned into months, the studio blossomed into a sanctuary. The joy of movement returned, each step a testament to my resilience. My body, once burdened by fear and neglect, had transformed. The weight I'd lost wasn't just physical, it was the shedding of a life that no longer served me. One evening, as I was finalizing the schedule for upcoming classes, the shrill ring of the phone pierced the quiet. My heart hammered against my ribs as an unknown number flashed on the screen. With a deep breath, I answered. "Amelia?" The voice on the other end was laced with venom, instantly recognizable. "It's David." A wave of nausea washed over me, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "What do you want?" "You know what I want," he snarled. "You come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, or I'll burn this whole damn place to the ground." A strangled cry escaped my lips. For a horrifying moment, the image of flames engulfing my new apartment filled my vision. But then, a spark of insight ignited within me. David didn't know. He didn't know I'd moved. "Go ahead, David," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Burn it all down. Just make sure you're doing everything right." Fury laced his voice as he sputtered threats, but I cut him off, hanging up before he could say another word. Panic clawed at me, but I quickly dialed the police. Explaining David's threats, the urgency in my voice resonated through the phone. To my relief, they took it seriously. "We'll send a patrol car to your former house to check things out, Mrs. Jones," the officer on the other end assured me. "And as for your ex-husband, we'll pay him a visit as well." Later that evening, a wave of relief washed over me as the police confirmed they'd apprehended David at his home, a Molotov cocktail half-assembled on his kitchen counter. The atmosphere of the courtroom felt a world away from the warmth of my dance studio. David sat across the room, a caged animal, his eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and fear. Beatrice hovered outside the courtroom, her once perfectly coiffed hair a mess, her designer suit hanging limply off her gaunt frame. She caught me outside the bathroom, her voice a desperate rasp. "Amelia, please," she pleaded, her eyes red-rimmed. "Think of David, of the family. Don't put him away." "Family?" I scoffed, the hurt a dull ache in my chest. The only family he ever cared about was the one he controlled. The prosecution presented a clear case: the Molotov cocktail found in David's kitchen, the threatening phone call, even a neighbor who'd seen David lurking around my old house the night before his arrest. As I took the stand, David's gaze burned into me, but I held it, my voice steady as I recounted the details of the call, the chilling threat of burning the whole damn place to the ground. The verdict was swift and merciless: 5 years behind bars. A flicker of satisfaction sparked within me, quickly replaced by a wave of relief. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served. My dance school blossomed. The small studio expanded, filled with the laughter and joy of movement. Looking at the faces of my students, their eyes alight with passion, a sense of completion washed over me. One evening, a notification popped up on my phone. An email from a prestigious dance company, requesting a collaboration. A wide smile stretched across my face. This was more than just a second chance, it was a new beginning, a melody, composed on my own terms.